Your host, Double Krown.
Hey, it's Double Krown. Oh my God, Britain is leaving the EU. Can you believe it? No, I can't believe it either. So I've just spent the last few days just watching everything unfold before me, because I wanted to do a video earlier, but I've just been watching the news, watching the news of the exit, and taking it all in. So the situation is that, I've been watching the mainstream news, but I've also been watching the alternative media and their reaction to it. And amongst the alternative media, there seems to be quite a lot of celebrations. Now, for me, this is definitely the result I wanted. I'm glad Britain's leaving the EU, but I'm not cracking open the champagne. I'm not, I haven't opened up a bottle of wine. So I'm not really sure why all the celebrations, because as far as I can see from the mainstream media, we have at the moment in the UK, in Britain, we have chaos. The Labour Party is in utter turmoil. We've got, the shadow cabinet. 10 or 20 of them have resigned. Jeremy Corbyn is at risk. His job as leader is at risk. We've had David Cameron resign. So basically, David Cameron has said, I'm not touching Brexit with a barge pole. He is not going to lift one finger to start the process going of Brexit. So basically, we are still in the EU and nothing is going to change, not until at least October. So we've got the Labour Party in crisis, we've got the Conservative Party in crisis, and then we've got Scotland telling us that they are going to do everything in their power to prevent Brexit, to try and stop us from leaving the EU. Despite the fact that it was one man, one vote, and they don't care about that, because as far as they're concerned, Scotland, despite millions of people in Scotland voting to get out of the EU, they claim a majority of Scots want to remain in the EU and not leave. So we've got this whole debacle with Scotland and the SNP. Then we've got frictions developing with Ireland now, and of course Ireland represents the only border, the only land border that we have with an EU partner. So there's possible friction there as well, and so the whole thing seems to be utter chaos. So I've not been cracking open the champagne. I've not been celebrating in any way whatsoever. But another thing that I recently heard was that when we do try to leave the EU, of course the negotiations will start. Article 50 has to be triggered, and that's not going to happen until we get a new Prime Minister, which won't be until October. So there's so many things to sort out. Now, there's also been rumours that there might be a snap election. So this is an interesting point, actually, if there is a general election, because we're in such turmoil, because we're in such chaos, they might try and force a snap election. And of course, when they enforce an election on us, a general election, new manifestos will be introduced, both from the Labour Party and from the Conservative Party, and of course from the Liberals and other parties as well. And of course, one of these new manifestos might say something like, we want to stay in the EU. So that is something that we need to watch out for. And I would not be in favour of a snap election. because that just means that we're now voting for something else when we've made it quite clear that we've voted to get out of the EU, and we just need somebody to actually enforce that and to start the proceedings. So that was an interesting point. But also, I think negotiations will begin with the EU, and those negotiations might include things like, having access to the single market, staying part of the single market. But they're apparently we've been sold a lie. We've been sold a lie that if we want to stay part of the single market, that we can control our borders. But apparently the EU insists, has a clause that if you have access to the single market, then your borders have to be open and you have to accept EU economic migration. So this is another factor that might play out in the weeks to come. But of course, everything is in turmoil. Nobody knows really which way it's going to go, how much chaos there's going to be. But this is all very interesting. And what could happen, I think, what potentially could happen is that even though we voted to get out of the EU, we might end up being in the EU in everything but name. For example, we might be having access to the single market, and therefore we will have no control of our borders. We will also be taking on a lot of the bureaucracy from Brussels. In effect, we will be members of the EU, but we will not, we will not officially be named members. We will be everything that the EU wants us to be, but not a fully fledged member, if you like. And we might even have to pay fees. We pay the 350 million pounds or whatever it is per whatever. We might be paying a proportion of that, perhaps not the full amount or whatever. So this is all going to play out. This could all take a long time. 2 years is the minimum, really, but it could easily get stretched into 3 years, into 4 years with negotiations, etc. And of course, in all that time, we are still full members of the EU. And as I was taking in the news of Brexit, I was watching the Labour Party descend into turmoil. And we've had lots of resignations, people trying to get Jeremy Corbyn out, trying to get him removed as leader of the Labour Party. And the reason they want to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn is because he was not strong enough in his case to remain within the EU. So that is their argument. So it just makes you wonder, do they want to put somebody else in as leader who is more pro-European, even though the British people have just said we want to get out? So the people who are trying to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn are the Blairites. Apparently they're the Blairites. So we've got people like Hilary Benn, who was fired, and just recently I think Stephen Kinnock has resigned. So those names might be familiar, Kinnock and Benn, because Hilary Benn, of course, is related to Tony Benn, former Labour MP. And similarly, Stephen Kinnock is the son of Neil Kinnock, who was a former leader of the Labour Party. So within the Labour Party itself, you can see signs of elitism. It's like certain families are classed as royalty, and they just continue one generation after another within the Labour Party. So you can see all the signs of elitism there. Now, the Labour Party traditionally are there to represent the poor, the blue-collar workers, the working class, the disenfranchised, the disabled. They are there to represent the poorer people of Great Britain, the Labour Party. But you can see that actually they're run by elites just as much as the Conservatives are, and they are no longer really the party of the people. So this is all very interesting to watch in the midst of the chaos that we are in. What will happen with Brexit? Only the future will tell. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.